I know that this is a very popular topic, so we're gonna kind of get right into it because I am excited for the Q&A piece of this. So please, as I go, hopefully a lot of your questions will be answered. You will probably also think of more questions. So anything is fair game, so please, follow the procedure to send your questions in as you think of them, and we'll have plenty of time for that at the end. Also, I always say I'm going to streamline the number of slides so that I don't have too many. And I'll tell you right now, I have not achieved that. So if I go quickly, don't worry, everything is recorded, so you can go back and look at any of the information I may pass through faster than you would want me to at another time. The last kind of housekeeping, I guess I'll say, is you all have this on your table. And again, I'm sure it's accessible on the website later. But this is a little worksheet we put together. Don't worry, you're not graded. You don't have to turn it in. It's just for you. But it's really just, there's an overwhelming amount of nutrition information. There is an overwhelming amount of cancer-specific nutrition information out there. So the purpose of this is just to help you maybe take some of the things that I say, that you see, that others ask about, that are meaningful to you, and kind of jot them down. So this is just a little worksheet so that at the end of this discussion, it's kind of actionable and something you can implement right away. So you're gonna maybe think about, you might already have some of this in mind, kind of what is your wellness vision, and then as we, related to nutrition, and then as we kind of go, what are some specific action steps you might take to help you towards your goals? And that's sort of what these different sections are. So feel free to take notes around that, just, because it's for you. Okay. See, I've already talked too long. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, so just want to start off. As I said, there is just so much information online, I think, in the world in general, and definitely after a diagnosis of cancer, there's a lot of, we call it the S word in a negative sense, the shoulds, right? Or the gotta do's, or the oughtas. And really, I want you to, if you're like a puppy coming out of the water, shake all of that off. And don't put anyone else's, whether it's someone who cares about you, it's someone you saw online, it's even your medical team. There's a lot of pressure that you have on yourselves, and let's try to back away from some of that burden of nutrition and try to embrace really its root. So the word nutrition comes from the word for nurture. And so let's kind of spend this time together really trying to channel that energy of nourishment and nurturing, whether it's for yourself or if you're here as a caregiver for the person that you're helping to support, and really coming at it from there instead of another list of things that you have to do or another list of things that you might be falling short on. So again, the words are small, don't worry about it. Basically, the gist of all of this is that in that nourishment, healthy eating and physical activity are things that support your energy, that help reduce fatigue, that support your gut health, that really support your immune system. And so it is a way that you can take some action in your way of approaching your treatment, your recovery, and leverage some of the nutrition to help your body do the job that it was meant to do in the first place. And so this doesn't have to be huge. You might already be eating healthy and have some really niche questions, which is awesome. You might be feeling like you want to change some of your daily eating habits, right? And so all of the small changes that you make are really where it's at. There's some really great books about habits out there now. And one of them, I can't remember the name of it, but it's something about the very small habits that we create, they're gonna build on each other, right? So even if you feel like there's a lot of work that you personally have to do in this space, that's not where we start. It's almost like an escape room. You have to go through each, like in phases, right? So don't rush ahead. There's no benefit there. It only adds more stress. Same thing with exercise. You might be walking 5 minutes a day, and that's awesome, right? And you're gonna build onto that. So this, is all gonna be great, but what if you don't have an appetite? Like how do you do any of this if you don't feel like eating? And that's a very common side effect. Some people have the opposite, where the treatment is really ramping up your appetite and it's hard to shut it off. You've got a lot of that food chatter going on. But when you're having appetite changes in whatever direction, there's some key ways you can start to improve that, make it better. So number one, how do you know when you're hungry? And that's kind of more that internal reflection, that sort of mindfulness of checking in with yourself. Am I hungry? Sometimes treatment can blunt that signaling or blunt the signal that you're not hungry, that you're full. So sometimes you need some guidelines, and sometimes you need to think about what works for you. So some people, like yogurt, avocado, great. Some people, I say those words and you're disgusted, that's fine. Textures are really relevant. So it's not just about what is on the nutrition facts panel or how much vitamin C is in that apple, but like how does it feel in your mouth? How does it feel in your gut? Are you constipated? Are you having diarrhea? We could talk about all the fun things. So like I said, there's no, don't hold back in your questions. So you want to kind of think about how does this food feel in your body? And always serving a safe food. This is actually a great trick with kids to get them to eat more of a variety, but it's very relevant when you're going through something that's impacted how you experience food, whether it's through smell or taste or texture. So if there's something that works for you, right? And I bet more often than not, particularly during treatment, that thing might be those things that you read you shouldn't have, like carbs, like potatoes or pasta or some kind of comfort food. Well, if that's what works for you and looking at a salad really feels off-putting for whatever reason, then maybe you're mixing broccoli into mac and cheese, right? What is that like safe food? What is that go-to thing that works for you? That should be kind of the foundation, and then you can experiment with new things around that or with that. Okay, so healthy digestion is really crucial, and we know that so many treatments impact our microbiome. So your microbiome is basically the ecosystem of healthy bacteria that live in your gut. And there's so many things that can impact the balance of those healthy bacteria, right? And so whether it's kind of off or not, they're leveraging gut health is a really helpful way to support energy, mental clarity, and even your immune system, even things like cholesterol. Your gut is like a gatekeeper for a significant component of your whole body's health. So eating foods with fiber, now again, it doesn't have to be like roughage. So for example, a probiotic is taking a supplement that's bringing new bacteria into your ecosystem. A prebiotic is a food for the bacteria that you already have. So that's generally a sort of safer, gentler, honestly, often more effective way to approach your gut health. So what are foods that you can eat that support those healthy bacteria you already have in your body? So we call those prebiotics. They certainly come as supplements and powders, and we can answer questions about that if you have them. But from a food perspective, they're found in things like grains and beans and fruits and vegetables. And honestly, cooking fruits and vegetables can be a really helpful way to access those prebiotic fibers. I'm already answering a question. Cooked food versus raw food, they're both good for different reasons. And you don't lose all the nutrients from cooking. And actually roasting things like broccoli really well in the oven is a great way to make it more digestible and to make that prebiotic fiber more accessible for your body. Hydration, super important. You can add things to your water if it doesn't taste good. So a splash of like 100% juice, a squeeze like, oh my gosh, the beautiful water that's here, that ginger, lemon, lime, something like that, orange, great ways. And movement also is really key for your gut. So this I'm sure you've seen, I'm sure you've heard, we'll kind of continue to revisit throughout this, but an abundance of plants is where you really want to focus. That doesn't mean you should avoid animal foods at all, but an abundance of plants is how you're going to get from food some of those key nutrients that support your immune system, that naturally reduce inflammation in the body, and that give you some of those healthy components to kind of keep your body working optimally. So they all have different actions, and what gives a fruit or vegetable its color is a sort of symbol of some of the important immune supportive benefits and properties, right? So obviously you can't read this. This is why you're gonna go and look at the recording and pause it and like zoom in. And you could fill this out on your own, right? This is just to get your mind working about the beautiful rainbow. Okay, so what makes a tomato red? What makes a sweet potato orange? What makes broccoli green or blueberries blue or cauliflower white? Those plant compounds help our body support our health and wellness and like vibrancy. So this is more not to be like, oh my gosh, I have to eat all the things on here. It's more to show you that abundance that exists in the world. So whatever you like, whatever is regional to your area, whatever is seasonal, that's how you want to go about this. So this is where the internet will fail you, okay? Or like the hooks of articles. You know, kale. Kale is great, but so is spinach, so is Swiss chard, so are green beans, et cetera, everything in the green category. Or like blueberries. Blueberries are awesome, but so are all the other blue and purple items like cabbage or eggplant or whatever it might be. So this is more to kind of get your wheels turning if you feel like you're in a rut. Maybe there's something on here you've never tried or something you haven't had in a long time. So let's put a spotlight on a few kinds of plant-based foods that really do offer a lot of benefit and have some research backing in terms of breast cancer specifically. So cruciferous vegetables, which all share something in common, those sulfur-containing compounds, right? So that's why they're known as like the gassy ones. So cooking them can really alleviate some of that symptom. But you know, bonus if you can identify all three things on here. But we've got Brussels sprouts, you've got really interesting things like Romanesco, like kind of cabbages or kale, all kinds of pretty things that look like flowers, but you can actually like, you know, eat these. And so cruciferous vegetables help our gut. They're really strong in that prebiotic fiber. These also tend to be rich in different vitamins, but they're really helpful for your liver. So the sulfur-containing compounds help your liver with its natural detoxification process. So they sell the kind of active ingredients in the food in all kinds of supplements, which again, at this moment, we're agnostic about, but in terms of how to really get that in your diet, it's eating foods from this family, whether they're cooked, whether they're shaved, however you want to go about it. But ideally, you know, once a day, 5 times a week, this should be a part of your fruit and vegetable intake. Carotenoids are another one, particularly like beta carotene, again, from food. So that orange pigment. So in the fall, a lot of great gems there, you know, all the different winter squashes, but certainly carrots are a great source, sweet potatoes, etc. So, and it's not like you can't eat pumpkin in the summer, you know, it's really good then too. But that family is also shown to be very immune supportive and potentially helpful specifically in terms of people who've been diagnosed with breast cancer. So I just put the cruciferous on here again, more to show you there's so many members of that family. And again, some of the cool things, if you do like a farm share or you go to a farmer's market, you're like, what is that? It might be a cruciferous vegetable. You may or may not like it, but you might give it a try. Okay, so what can you commit to? What's something you can put on this paper? So 5 a day is that big campaign that, you know, was popular for Americans, you know, a bit ago. And so that is still relevant, but if you look at the world and you look at what's really needed in research, that's kind of scratching the surface. So on average, Americans eat like 1 or 2 servings of fruits or vegetables a day. I'd venture to guess most people in this room, you know, probably do more than that, but regardless, you want to have like 2 fruits and 3 or more vegetables, as much as you can. Don't worry about serving, all that nonsense is not helpful or relevant. You're just eating them. Like it's more of a checkbox. Is there a representative from the fruit or vegetable family in my glass or on my plate? Yes or no? You do not need to think more about it, right? Is there a representative from the protein family? Yes or no? Those 2 pieces should be part of almost all of your meals. Now you're on vacation, you're traveling, you're too busy, it's all fine, right? It's not literal in the moment. But overall, as one of those little micro habits you want to adopt, you're looking to check those boxes in a very simple manner. We're going to talk about sugar, but we obviously want to eat less than on average, and healthy fats are very beneficial. So healthy fats like avocado, olive oil, nuts, seeds, nut butters, hummus, things made from those ingredients, olives. Those are all anti-inflammatory and very helpful. They give you good calories if you're looking to kind of boost up what you're eating. So those can be helpful. We're getting into spring, even though it doesn't really feel like it today, but we are. And soon we can start planting. Maybe you have an indoor garden. Maybe your stuff, like our chives, are already starting to come back outside, which is awesome. But growing food or going to farmers markets really is a great way to get more variety, get more of that freshness, and the immune benefit for your microbiome from local produce is even greater. So that doesn't mean if, the blueberries came from, well, I guess you guys are like near New Jersey, but like let's pretend something came from California. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't eat it by any stretch, right? We know the evidence lies in just the prevalence of these foods in your kind of everyday habits. But whenever you're able to have something local, it does give you a little bit of an added boost and a little bit of an added benefit, right? And so, we've tried growing potatoes, we failed miserably, but you can get them at the farmer's market. It just did not work. They were like this big and we got 3 from the whole season. It was exciting. And my husband's family is Irish, so it was like really exciting, but it was definitely, we didn't plant them again. But anyway, herbs are another great way to add flavor, and just like vegetables and fruits, they have a lot of immune supportive anti-inflammatory properties. So shopping tips, produce, just buy it. Frozen is very healthy as well. In fact, when something is out of season, frozen produce might be higher in certain key nutrients because it hasn't traveled as far, right? So again, don't get caught up in the weeds on this stuff. We've seen in research that it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't all have to be raw or from your backyard or fresh. Frozen is a great way to also check that box more often. You're tired, you're busy, you know that you have those options in the freezer. It makes life easier, and easy is important, right? You can still be healthy in terms of your diet and make it easy. We want to emphasize plants, and meal prep is a lot of what we're going to kind of focus on now. So one thing that is helpful is overall reducing salt intake. Now, some of you might actually need to eat more salt, okay? So you have to kind of know your own situation. Some treatments like radiation, sometimes chemo, it might actually deplete your body of salt. So, those are good questions for your doctor if you're working with a local nutritionist. But overall, Americans eat far too much sodium. A lot of that comes in ultra-processed foods or a lot of takeout, right? So kind of having those easy options available for you that you can still make something sort of easily from scratch can really, really be helpful. So you do want to sort of be cognizant in either direction, okay, about sodium, but it can be hidden, right? So again, the example here is like canned tomatoes, which are a great way to make your own tomato sauce that doesn't have a lot of added sugar. But it's wildly different in terms of the sodium content. So just pay attention to that if it's something that you need to be paying attention to. Not everyone's salt sensitive. Okay, I know we're gonna get a lot of questions about sugar. So we're gonna talk about it first. So sugar, there's added sugar, which is now on the food label. I'll come back to this, but okay, see, it's like in red. You can see added sugar. So added sugar is the thing we want to have less of. Sugar alcohols, which maybe are on here or not, that's like a fake sugar that can really give you horrible GI symptoms. Just FYI, it's in gum, it's in mints, it's in a lot of sugar-free things. So don't necessarily go for that sugar-free thing because it might really be terrible on your stomach. But added sugar is what we want to reduce. Natural sugars in fruit come with a lot of nutrients and do not act in the same way. Okay, so I'll go back to all the things I skipped over here. So natural sugar, okay, so if you see or hear carrots have too much sugar, true or false? Yay, A+. Okay, right? Same thing with like fruit, but remember, we want to have like 2 fruits a day in general. Not that if you had 3, there's a problem, but that's kind of a general guideline, and more vegetables proportionately to fruits. But things like beets, fruits that or vegetables that taste sweet do not necessarily have a lot of sugar. They have a lot of nutrients and vitamins that can impact how your body processes that sugar, and they have a lot of fiber, which helps to blunt that blood sugar spike as well. So they're really helpful. Added sugars, those are the ones we want to cut down on. So as I mentioned, there's a lot of benefits of foods with natural sugar. So how do we detect those added sugar? The food label is the best way. So look for that, includes X grams of added sugar, because there are sneaky sugars everywhere where they don't belong. Salad dressing, tomato sauce, ketchup, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All of these words can mean added sugar on a label, right? So again, molasses or honey or maple syrup are natural added sugars, if that makes sense. They're not ultra processed. You just don't want to have them in excessive amounts. But if you want to put a teaspoon of local honey in your smoothie, great, or your green tea, awesome, right? But if you want to put like a half a cup of maple syrup in a granola bar recipe, maybe you can cut back on that a little bit, okay? It's not like binary, all or nothing. It really has to do with the quantity. Some of these things clearly are not natural at all, or like they're extracted and whatever. So, agave is another one that's like really high in sugar, even though it does come from like a cactus. It's not really, it's a lot more glycemic or stronger on your blood sugar than something like molasses or honey or even maple syrup. All right, so we'll have plenty of time for questions about all that. You can't read this, I know, or maybe, but these are just ways to reduce sugar naturally. So choosing whole fruits, right? So the orange juice out here was delicious, and maybe you need it, right? Your blood sugar might be low, or you might be really thirsty, you might need the hydration, great. Maybe you dilute some of that, but in general, having the whole fruit is going to give you less sugar. So if you want to grab like a clementine, and that feels refreshing and satisfying, that's going to have less available sugar in it than a glass of juice would, okay? So that's one example. Things like with the tomato sauce, right? Like if you buy like the Pommy or like a canned BPA-free, like just strained tomatoes, you can put your own stuff in it. You control how much salt. You put no sugar into that. You might add some fresh or some dried herbs, or maybe you like garlic or onions or whatever it might be, but you can easily kind of create your own things. And that's a great way to meal prep, right? Or some of those key sauces. So now fatigue. Fatigue is the most common side effect of any cancer treatment. 90% of people going through treatment for cancer, not just specifically breast cancer, report fatigue. And I think like our whole world is full of fatigue. So being tired really can be alleviated with physical activity. That sounds counterintuitive, but moving your body slowly, easily, in whatever way feels good to you, short duration, is one of the best medicines against fatigue. So inactivity is going to perpetuate fatigue. So like there was gentle yoga this morning. There's a lot of ways to have very gentle movement. On a nutrition side of things, hydration is very connected to fatigue. And so is having like not enough nutrients in your food. So looking for those natural vitamins and minerals that are in fruits and vegetables. The fiber can actually help support your energy. And these are all ways, and excuse me, it sounds silly, but eating. So if you don't have an appetite, setting a timer to have something every few hours is going to help your energy. If you're trying to stop gaining weight, generally eating 3 meals a day can be better. But if you're struggling to eat enough, or if you're feeling very fatigued, having those small, frequent meals might end up being better for you. So there's a lot of options. Okay, so hopefully you've written down a couple of things, but now let's talk about meal prep. Show me hands. How many people find the idea of meal prep overwhelming? Okay, good. We have a lot of honest people here. Excellent. How many people actually like meal prep and appreciate the benefits it brings you? Awesome. Okay, so for those of you who like it, feel free later to share some of your best kind of tips for everybody else. For those of you who feel overwhelmed, let's break it down and make it easier. So first and foremost, if we enjoy doing something, we want to do it more often. So setting aside time and planning, I mean, this is not going to sound surprising to you. I actually really like cooking. I like doing meal prep. I don't always get to it, but I like it. I find the process very relaxing. Okay, there are these flow behaviors, like when you lose track of time in a positive way. I'm sure this conference, you've been here all weekend and it probably feels like it went by really fast. That's because you've been enjoying yourself and connecting, learning, doing some self-care. So washing produce, chopping, cooking, these can become those positive, repetitive behaviors. Maybe you put on TV shows that you like. Maybe you put on music that you like and you kind of dance and move around. There are a lot of ways to maybe meal prep is your me time, away from all the people in your world demanding and needing your attention. And so, anyway, it can be really fun. It can also be exciting, right? So maybe you try a theme and you can check in with the other people that you live with, or you can do you and let them do them. That's also totally available to you at any point in time. So maybe you try themes like Taco Tuesday or pizza on Fridays, because that can be super, super healthy. And you can make things in a very healthy way. Or Meatless Monday to try to get more of those plant-based foods. But you can start to create your own traditions for yourself within your family, but try to kind of think of a theme. Start small. If you leave here thinking, I am going to meal prep for 7 days a week, I'm going to tell you right now, that's not a good idea. Because most likely that's not going to happen, and then you're going to feel frustrated and you're not going to do it at all. So rather, think about 2 or 3 days at a time. That's a much more manageable way of approaching meal prep, right? So think about cooking 2 or 3 days a week to try to stretch your meals, whether it's breakfast, because you can meal prep for breakfast. You can meal prep lunches, dinners, snacks. They're all options for you. So start small. The next is dedicate and plan out. Maybe this is what goes on your sheet. Think about your average week. What days could you do the cooking part? What days could you do the shopping part? And it might be online. Your shopping might be on your phone completely, okay? That might be easy and wonderful. But think about those two things as separate occurrences, okay? Your Sundays, now some people, again, might love it, but they might turn miserable if you think, I'm gonna plan what I'm gonna eat for the week, then same day, I'm gonna go shopping for all those ingredients, and then I'm gonna come home and I'm gonna cook all of that food, and then I'm gonna put it into storage containers. I'm just tired thinking about that. So let's plan it out a little bit differently. Separate those key tasks into different days, different parts of the day. Try to kind of break it down. Stock up on staple ingredients. So some people like need a recipe to cook, and that's fine and great. Some people can kind of be like more like you're on Chopped, you know, like there's this random box of stuff you got to make into a meal. So that's another skill that you can approach from like a fun perspective, and sometimes it'll turn out well and sometimes it won't turn out as well. But you can kind of look at, that's why stocking your freezer with frozen fruits and vegetables is so helpful. That's why having things like, you know, chickpea or whole wheat or whatever kind of high protein, whatever kind of pasta you want, right, in the cabinet is really helpful. Or having grains. You can buy pre-cooked frozen quinoa, pre-cooked frozen brown rice, or any kind of, you know, something like that, right? Having some staples, having those spices, herbs, seasonings, really make sure you have, or those like canned or boxed tomatoes, like those kind of key components that you can use as a foundation. So you're not always having to buy everything. You know, have olive oil, have avocado oil, just have some of these staples, have some beans, right? Things that you can have. As I mentioned, breakfast is definitely something you can meal prep for. So oatmeal or overnight oats can be really, really fun. So overnight oats, do people know what that is? Awesome. So it's almost like a kid's, like you make the sand in the jar, you know, like you kind of put the layers into the mason jars. Like rolled oats tends to work best. If you're gluten-free, get gluten-free. If you're not, you don't have to. And then you can put other stuff in there. It could be chia seeds, it could be ground flax seeds, it could be cinnamon. You could add in, you know, some people like to put nuts on top because they want the crunch. Other people want it to be soft. You could add peanut butter, almond butter, cashew butter. You could add frozen or fresh fruit, and then whatever kind of liquid, you know, milk or almond milk or oat milk, et cetera, and close it, put it in the fridge, take the lid off. You could eat it cold, you could heat it up. And you can make a few of those at a time. You can also make oatmeal on the stove and put all that stuff in it and make enough that you have a leftover, so you just throw your glass container in the microwave the next day and heat it up really quick and you're ready to go. So things like that. You can make quinoa porridge, which is basically like oatmeal out of quinoa. You can make chia pudding if you like that texture. These are a lot of things that you can do ahead of time. I mentioned containers. This is like not a joke. If you don't, first of all, I don't know about you, and if anyone has a solution, everything on TV, like every time I open that cabinet, no matter how hard I try, it all comes falling out. But have some containers. If you haven't bought new containers in years, you should probably throw them out and get new ones. Like if they're chipped or broken or your plastic's been washed like a million times. But really, honestly, get like cute containers. Sometimes they're on sale, but that's a really key part of this. The containers are important. They also sell little thermoses that are hot or cold that you can keep stuff in and bring with you for like soups and stews or oatmeal. But seriously, look at your containers. Okay, we mentioned breakfast. Here are some other ideas, and love to hear from anybody else, some of your favorites. But egg muffin cups are basically like an omelet. You can put lots of veggies in there, and you put it into muffin tins and bake it, and then you have those like individual kind of egg bites to go. You can make a frittata, which is again, like you're whisking everything in one bowl. You pour it in a lasagna pan, you bake it, and then you can cut it into pieces, and you can heat it up with toast. You can eat it like it is. So there are lots of options for things that you can batch make or have batch ingredients for. Baking would be actually, and this is a recipe, and I put this on here so that you can look at it later and have it. But baking is another way as well. So again, one of those kind of comfort foods, something that's portable, something easy. You can replace some of the flour with protein powder if you want to up the protein. You can add plain Greek yogurt to make it fluffier and to add more protein and more calcium. You could add things like ground flaxseed. So like if I'm making banana bread or waffles or muffins or things like that, I'm often playing around with those ingredients to kind of maximize particularly the protein and the fiber while still keeping it delicious. So there's a lot of ways you can do that. Okay, quick lunch ideas, bowls, and I have another thing that you won't be able to read the fine print on right now that tells you like 1,000 ideas. But bowls are very popular. You can obviously buy them out, but they're expensive. You can make them easily at home. And this is where prep can come in handy, where everyone, or even for yourself, you can customize the different flavors or textures. So using like quinoa or farro or brown rice or something like that as a base. You can also obviously make soups and stews and put so many good things into them. And those are great. Spring rolls or something that's wrapped up. So you could buy like collard greens or Swiss chard. You can kind of blanch them. So sort of drop them in boiling water and then put them in ice really quick and make them more pliable. And you can use those greens as a wrapper. You can buy like a rice paper wrapper. You could buy, obviously like a wrap, and there's millions of kinds. You could use a corn tortilla. You could use sort of lettuce. You could use anything. But the idea is you can make leftover wraps. So let's say you had taco night. Let's say you had stir fry. Let's say, honestly, whatever it was, some kind of rice dish. You can take that dinner and wrap it into something and bring it to work with you, or bring it on the go, or just repurpose it into another way. So there are some ideas for some easy, very healthy kinds of bowls that you can create at any time. So this is something you can look at later, but these are tips for how you might create a variety of things for lunch that could also be like a dinner. So there's some ideas of different kinds of breads and different kinds of wraps. You want to pick, again, that base. You want to pick a protein. So the protein could be a combination of things. So it could be, peas and sunflower seeds. It could be something like egg. It could be chicken. It could be fish. It could be a lot of things. But you want protein in there. You want some kind of like accessory, something fun. Maybe you've sauteed a whole bunch of like mushrooms and garlic and onions and spinach. And then you just have that, and you can toss that into your eggs. You could toss that into a wrap. You could toss that in, you just, eat it with whatever you want. You could put that over chicken, etc. And then some kind of accent. Maybe you buy or you make, this is adventurous, but like pickled red onions. Or maybe you just have sliced red onions. Or you have pickles. Or you have olive oil or hummus. You have some kind of accent on top of your bowl. And this is a whole list you can look at later of just other kinds of lunch ideas that might be outside of the box or you haven't thought of, or maybe you know how to make everything on here and you can tell us all about that later and share your wisdom. So what about snacks? We talked a lot about, maybe needing a snack, maybe wanting a snack, or having like a mini meal. So again, it's that pair, that partnership of protein and a fruit or vegetable. So maybe you slice up pears and you put some peanut butter on those, or celery. Maybe you make yourself a smoothie and you can put all kinds of stuff in there. Maybe you take carrots or peppers or cucumbers and you dip those into hummus. Or you make like a ranch dip with plain Greek yogurt. You can use your air fryer or your oven. You can make sweet potatoes or something like that and use that as like a chip or like a fry shape and dip that in. There are a lot of options, right, or vehicles. If you're dealing with kind of an upset gut, things like rice cakes or something really simple like that can just be a canvas for other things. Or you can make it really cute and fun, especially if you don't have a good appetite. So if you take little crackers or like rice cakes and you can kind of have different things on them. Maybe one day it's more cucumber forward or another day it has hummus on there. You can, or make avocado on like whole wheat toast and you could top that with, nutritional yeast if you want to kind of go outside the box and look for something plant-based that's high in protein and B12. There are just so many ideas. So this is just kind of more of that. You can make energy bites. You can buy these kinds of things as well, but you can also make a variety of energy bites. You basically kind of mix everything together in a bowl and make it into circles, cut it into squares, and these are sort of on-the-go little protein gems that you can, again, customize. This one has chocolate in it. You may not like chocolate, or it might give you reflux, so you can use other kinds of ingredients. I am not particular to any brand. I just grabbed a few things that I sometimes like to get at the store. But there are roasted chickpeas. There's probably 4 or 5 different brands now. And you can make this yourself in the oven really easily if you would like to. But again, that's going to give you protein, fiber, and some kind of crunch or flavor. So that's another idea. And not every packaged food is bad for you. Again, these are just ideas. There are like pouch foods, for lack of a better word. They're like similar to what it's like the Go-Go Squeeze kind of applesauce for kids, which actually is good for anybody. There are protein-based smoothies that come in these pouches that are shelf-stable. So again, if you like the texture and the temperature, there are a ton of them out there that are dairy-based or plant-based, but it's just something you can keep in your bag. If you have a long treatment day, you can bring these things with you, and they're not going to go bad, and they're easy and they're fast. This is another brand. There's so many of these things available in the market now, and they're not geared towards patients. They're geared towards busy people or people who don't know how or don't want to cook, right? And so there is just a lot of option out there for something you could purchase that is still healthy. And again, they're bars. I could add to this every day, but I listed, because I know people ask these questions. So I listed a couple of favorites, and again, like I said, they change all the time, but there are a lot of different bars that are healthy, right? But you want to read the labels for well, obviously allergens or things you're sensitive to, but also for added sugar, things like sugar alcohols, like some of the stuff that you want to try to limit. But there are some really healthy things that you can pick up that come in different sizes, and some of these are like niche things that you don't find at the store, so that's why I wanted to list them so you know about them. Same thing with protein drinks. You can make them without any kind of powder ever and just use ingredients, or you can look for some brands that are healthy, particularly that it can be plant-based if you're looking to get more plants and more plant protein that are either powders or ready to drink, that are alternatives to some of the options you may or may not have seen in your medical office, that you may or may not have tried and may or may not have disliked or found didn't agree with you. And actually some of these too, well, Cape Farms, if I can go back, Cape Farms in particular, that's still more of a clinical-ish option, and so they do offer free samples for patients, or providers can order them for their patients. Same thing with Orgain. So like you can go on their websites and you can order a free sample if you want to try it. Also, both of those depends probably on the state, but many insurers will, with a prescription, will cover them through a pharmacy, just like more of the name brand pharmaceutical options. So there are plant-based / kind of healthier options available that you may be able to access more clinically, just like other things. And again, that's when a dietitian or a nutritionist can be very helpful to you. And unfortunately, like 1 out of every 2,000 cancer patients in the US meets with an oncology dietitian, but we do exist, we are out there. You often have to ask, but I would definitely suggest if you find oral supplements helpful or beneficial or necessary, just to start inquiring about other brands that might be covered in the same way so that you can try some different things. Dinner ideas, we kind of talked about these. Veggie burgers, like you can make all kinds of great stuff. All right, I want to kind of start to wrap up so that we can ask questions, but I'm just going to take like 2 minutes and kind of maybe 5 at the most, but I'm going to say 2 and probably mean 5, but then that still gives us 50 minutes for questions. Some different ingredients that you can cook with that might give you some benefits. So turmeric, curcumin is the active ingredient in turmeric, and cooking with it is very safe. It's not spicy. It's sort of what makes curry yellow, but not what makes it spicy. So turmeric is anti-inflammatory. It's good for your gut lining. You can add it to all kinds of foods. You can use very small amounts and kind of work your way up if you would like to. but that's a beneficial one to keep in that spice cabinet and you're sort of ready to go. Selenium is found in Brazil nuts as well as shellfish is another common source, but selenium is a key nutrient. Now it's an antioxidant, so again, it's like for certain kinds of treatment, you want to get that from food and not from supplements, but selenium is really key for metabolism, for immunity, for thyroid health. So anybody with an underactive thyroid, selenium can be very, very helpful. I don't mean like in place of medicine, but just as something in your diet that can really be supportive for energy, metabolism, and immunity. Zinc, we all learned a lot about zinc over COVID because it's very good for your immune system. You shouldn't necessarily take it as a supplement all the time, but getting it from your diet, it's prevalent in cashews, chickpeas, and seafood is a really good source. So like shellfish is a great source of zinc. Zinc is really crucial for our immune system. And so again, it's something in your diet that can be very, very helpful. So I mentioned earlier, we want this plant-forward diet. A Mediterranean diet has been shown sort of like insert reason here. I think we're kind of finding whether it's longevity, cardiovascular health, prediabetes or diabetes, cancer prevention and promotion of survivorship. There's so many reasons that Mediterranean diet really represents an eating pattern that has an abundance of plant-based foods, including whole grains, as well as proteins like fish, some eggs, some chicken, and more limited amounts of red meat. But it really is kind of, again, a theme for cookbooks, for recipe websites that you can use to kind of start to get some ideas for what you might want to create. Those phytonutrients in foods, there's so many great ones. And so there's some fun things like garlic is something when you smash it in the beginning and let the air touch it, it potentiates or makes some of those anti-cancer properties even stronger. Broccoli is the opposite. Chop your broccoli last. The more you kind of like play around with the broccoli, it doesn't make it the stuff stronger. So it's not like a problem if you're like, oh no, I chopped the broccoli first. It's great. But just if you want to have extra fun with your nerdy nutrition knowledge, then you can chop the garlic first and the broccoli last. And the stalk of the broccoli is really healthy. It's very high in protein, not like the same amount of protein as like chicken, but for a vegetable, it is a good source of protein and obviously that prebiotic fiber. But you can cut the stem, the stalk. Like my son, he just eats it, which is great, but I like that phase right now. I don't know if it'll last, but and I like to put it in my air fryer or just roast it in the oven, and it's really delicious. It just breaks it down a little bit. It has an interesting flavor, but it's also a great way to cut down, obviously, on food waste too. But don't get rid of the stalk, I guess, is the moral of that story. So plant foods for key nutrients. There are a lot of great sources of protein. So, another question I know I'll get. Tofu, edamame, tempeh, natural sources of soy food does not contribute to breast cancer. In fact, it's very healthy and proven to be safe. Is a complete protein, has all the same amino acids of meat, fish, chicken, and eggs, and is very versatile. So, you don't have to eat those foods if you don't like them, but if you do, don't be afraid to do so. They're very, very healthy. And that's an evolution that's changed over the years. I'd say 20 years ago, it was like, oh, maybe twice a week, or we don't know. We know. You don't have to avoid them. You can eat as much as you want, and they're very beneficial. And they don't have too much estrogen. Excuse me, your husband, your son, your father, it is not going to make them have estrogen in their body. It's healthy and safe for everyone. However, soy protein powders or things that say like isolated soy protein or stuff like that that's kind of ultra processed is higher in phytoestrogens and unclear its relationship to somebody with an estrogen dependent conditions. So I would say to avoid like soy protein powder or bars that are made with soy protein powders, but eating tofu is not the same as that. Okay, iron, it's like food combinations or synergy. If you eat plant-based iron like greens and you put vitamin C like, peppers or lemon on it, that really boosts up the absorbability of iron. Here's another like cooked versus raw debate. Cooked spinach, kale, whatever kind of green has 10 times the amount of absorbable iron than raw. Raw greens have way more vitamin C because that gets broken down by heat. But by cooking the greens, you're softening the fiber. Fiber tends to trap minerals. So you'll get more magnesium, more iron out of the green when it's cooked. So if you're looking to boost up iron through your diet, kind of sauteing a little bit of spinach with some olive oil, garlic if you like that, and lemon to give it vitamin C is a great way to go about that. All right. So as I mentioned, plant forward. You don't have to be vegan, but you could. You could just eat some plants. You don't need to label yourself is kind of the moral of this slide here. There's like so many ways that you can eat plant foods. And these are some ideas. We talked about all of this, how to get started. But this is something you can refer back to later if you're not a big plant eater. We talked about the importance of fitness, really, really beneficial also for your gut health. If you would like to learn more about symptom relief, I have an online course. You can connect with me. Feel free to email me at any point. I put that on here. I'm not big on Instagram, but I will go on after this in case anybody, that's how you like to connect with people, just so that we can connect. I don't mind it. I also don't love it personally, but I understand, the value, in terms of connecting with people. So that's it. Excuse me. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Stacy. So much knowledge and just tiny things that we can incorporate one day at a time. I think I really appreciate the concept of it's not everything at one time, it's day by day and what we can, the small improvements. I think the book you were referencing, it reminded me of Atomic Habits, which
That's
is
one of them. And I think there's another one though called Tiny Habits, but yeah, Atomic Habits is a great book.
I love it. It's just like piling small things on top of each other. Yeah. Just a reminder, when you're sending in your questions, to frame them in a general manner, and so that we can help as many people as possible. I possibly will be leaning on my friend Shazine down here to help me with the questions, and we may not get to all of them, but thank you so much. Just to start off, I think just right off the top, can you share why phytochemicals? Why?
Oh, yes, great. So it's just essentially the word for plant. So these are nutrients that are already in plants that science and research has shown what civilizations have already known for thousands of years, that they help us. So one way to think about it is kind of what helps defend the plant in nature are things that help defend our bodies as well. So the phytochemicals are basically the plant's immune system. And so by eating the plant's immune system, it helps our immune system as well.
Oh, I love that. I know for myself, the realizing where my immune system was like pre-diagnosis, and then having things like chemo and different things that really compromise our immune system. Do you have some direct tips on ways to really bolster our immune system additionally with plants?
Yeah, absolutely. So first off, all of our immune cells are made out of protein. So eating protein is so important. And when you're going through treatment, or if you've had surgery, anything that requires your body to, or you're training for a half marathon, like whatever it might be, when your body is going through healing and recovery, there's a higher demand for those building blocks of protein to allow your body to do that. So a person going through treatment has a higher, or obviously recovering from surgery, has a higher protein need than they would if they weren't going through those things. And so it's really challenging, especially if your appetite is less. You need more and you want less. And so that's where some of those other strategies kind of come in. But protein, whether it's from healthy animal foods or plant-based foods, is a big part of our immune system that we don't often hear about. Obviously, those phytochemicals in fruits and vegetables is another component. Sleep is a massive part of immunity, and how you take the building blocks you ate and convert them into positive processes or tissue rebuilding in your body. Sleep is when your recovery and repair potential is at its highest. So that's how you sort of lock it all in. Stress management, mindfulness, meditation, yoga, acupuncture, any integrative therapy, or anything in your life that helps you to relax is also going to support your immune system by supporting its activity plus taking away extra work. You already have enough work, and so you don't want to give yourself more. So the last piece I'll say on that is like timing of eating. So eating late at night, right? Like obviously if you need more energy and like you follow your appetite, you might want to snack after dinner. That's totally fine. But eating late at night, it's not about like, oh, I don't have time to burn these calories off. Like that's not why eating late at night tends to be not helpful. It's not helpful for your gut. Your body's trying to wind down and go into that recovery and repair and cleanup mode. And so when you're eating late at night, it's like your boss coming up to you at 4:55 on a Friday and saying, hey, I got a new project for you. Do you want to get started on this? No.
Yeah, no.
I want to go home and go to bed.
Yes.
Yes. So it's more about burnout. So avoiding burnout in your body, one way to do that is like front loading your eating earlier in the day and kind of tapering that down as you get closer to going to bed.
Love that. Thank you. Those are so many great tips. I think a big question that always tends to come up is, can you and how can you get enough protein on a vegan diet?
Yes. The answer is yes. Yes, you can. But you do have to be intentional about it, and you often will want to combine various foods that have protein to really get that robust variety of those building blocks. So like in one of those grain bowls, for example, there's some protein in whole grains. There's protein in things like nuts and seeds. There's protein obviously in beans and in legumes. I mentioned like nutritional yeast, which looks like a Parmesan cheese grater. There's things like that. The tofu and soy is a great way, like edamame or tofu or tempeh. Those are such great ways to get more protein. And just looking to infuse it whenever you can. So like I mentioned with like pasta or pizza crust, they're like our lentil based or chickpea based. Those are going to give you, again, more bang for your buck in terms of protein. So like one of those kinds of pastas might give you anywhere up to 10 grams of protein or 14 grams of protein, in that pasta versus like 2 if it was like regular. So there are so many ways, and there's just so many options. I would not be like afraid if you do want to be 100% plant-based. You're just going to want to do that planning and be cognizant of making sure that you're layering those things in. So like in your oatmeal, you're for sure going to want to put some kind of nut butter or nuts or seeds potentially to kind of boost that protein up.
I know for myself, I was so intimidated originally with nutritional yeast, and then it's become, I put it in almost everything now. It's like a cheesy, I don't eat cheese or dairy, and so I put it in, I'll make broccoli with it, and it's so good, like Velveeta broccoli, but it's not.
No.
So I just love it for everything.
I put it in soups a lot.
Oh, it's like,
It's just so good. It tastes so good. So that was kind of a good find, I guess.
And there's not many foods that have B12.
Correct.
So it is a great source of B12 as
Yes.
well. Just flipping back, is there an ideal cutoff time for eating?
I mean, in general, like 2 hours before you go to bed tends to be a definite guideline for reducing things like reflux or interruption of sleep. But sometimes it depends on your own body, right? So it might be it's not so much the time of day, because that's like another one of those annoyances with online information when they're like, don't eat after 7 p.m. You're like, is that Eastern time? Is that Pacific time? Is that like, it's just so, sorry, so frustrating. Right. But I mean, some people might feel better like not eating 4 hours before bed, or you might just find if you finish eating by generally, 8 p.m. and you start eating the next day, at 8 a.m., you got to play with it. But I would say at least 2 hours before going to sleep, maybe more, just sort of depends.
Sure. One thought I had is around the idea is most of us are going in for treatment. And do you have any suggestions on the day of treatment, ways that we can, make any benefits to the therapy that we're having or might take away from it? Yeah,
that's another very, you can answer it generally and answer it sort of specifically depending on the person, right? So the general answer is, sort of like knowing your body. So I would say number one is being prepared. So your clinic may have amazing food that they give you that you love. Great, you don't have to bring a lot with you. That may not, generally speaking, may not be the case. And so you want to have like your go bag of food and snacks. And you don't have to eat them, but you want to kind of have those things with you, including fluids that work well for you, whether you bring a protein shake or a smoothie that you've made or something you can put in your water, whatever it is, an electrolyte beverage, something like that. So I would say definitely bring things with you. Most people feel better the night before and the day of kind of eating lighter. So you might lean into more liquid items or just lighter things. So more snack kind of size things. If you eat dairy, things like cottage cheese or Greek yogurt might be easy and small and helpful. Maybe you're bringing like a soup or a stew, or a smoothie, something like that, that's lighter. There's a whole nother area that falls into more of the more sort of medical advice, and depending on what kind of chemo and what your status is in terms of blood counts and weight and whatnot. But there is some research looking at things like, does doing a little bit of much lighter eating or sort of intermittent or kind of 12, 24-hour fasting around chemo make it more effective? It really, there's a lot of nuance to that. So that one's not a general answer. That's a more talk to your doctor and your dietitian answer. So I would say it's kind of like same thing for people who do sport events, like triathlons and marathons. For sure, don't test something on the day of for the first time. That's like always a mistake. Like you want to go with things that are your go-to items that you tolerate well and that you like. That's really, really crucial. So kind of, I would say, try to identify what those things are. It might be a grilled cheese sandwich, and that's great. You don't have to kind of overthink it.
Amazing. Shazy.
We have a couple of really great questions here. I have a 3-part question for Stacy around sugar intake. So recommended added sugar intake per day. Do you have a sugar substitute that you recommend that doesn't cause GI issues? And the third piece is, do you have any guidance on patches and sugar patches and monitoring your glycemic intake?
Okay, great. And I think I'll remember all 3 parts. So first part is just based on the American Heart Association, which kind of helps set some of the guidance for added sugar. So the general guideline for all American adults for men is less than 36 grams per day, and for women is less than 24 grams per day of added sugar. So that's kind of the general guideline. So that's probably a good place to kind of think about that. As far as sugar substitutes slash, everything is so complicated. You sort of call them like non-caloric, whatever, just natural things. So stevia is a plant, and so if that's the only ingredient in stevia, that works for some people. Some people find that it can upset like IBS. Some people don't like the taste. So stevia may or may not work for you. Kind of the new stevia is called monk fruit. And so there are like monk fruit, same concept as stevia. It's an extract from a fruit that is not a chemical made in a lab that you're starting to see on food packages or that you can buy as a non-caloric natural sweetener in the aisle where you find those things. The things that end in OL, like xylitol, erythritol, mannitol, sorbitol, those are all sugar alcohols, and those are artificial sweeteners that can often upset somebody's stomach. Not everyone, right? But for many people it does. And then as far as like a continuous glucose monitor, it's a great idea for some people. It's, you know, it's something that you'd have to talk to like your nurse or your doctor to, you know, maybe you can just buy them, maybe not, but they're sort of maybe helpful, maybe not. But they are becoming more common in people who don't necessarily have diabetes, who just want to know. So I think it's really a fair question if that's something you're concerned about or that's on your mind. I will say some of the caveats are if you take steroids as part of your treatment or part of a pre-treatment, those are going to increase your blood sugar. So kind of like, and that's just how they work. So like, what is the normal range that you should be in might be different than what Google tells you. So you kind of want to talk to your team and just understand. Also, stress raises your blood sugar. So it might not be what you're eating. It might be kind of more of those mindfulness or those stress reducing habits that might help. But I personally love data. So if you love data and your team can help you interpret the data, then that might be something, you know, to look into.
Amazing. Well done. That's a 3-part
I was like counting on my
takedown.
fingers.
Yeah, we did that. So just to maybe get close to wrapping it up here, but tie in coffee, diet soda, and alcohol.
Ooh, yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
all good things that we didn't talk about.
Yeah.
So alcohol, we know that alcohol intake can be a risk factor for many forms of cancer, including breast cancer. That doesn't mean you should never drink or that you have to completely give alcohol up. Again, it's a really good conversation to have with your oncologist. And, you know, it depends on kind of where you're at in the whole process, right? So if you're in the, you know, the throes of treatment and you're on a lot of meds and you're having trouble sleeping, maybe not the best time. But if you're kind of, you know, in survivorship and, you know, further away from surgery and treatment and, you know, you want to have an occasional glass of wine, that might be perfectly fine. Some people find they just, you know, and with just natural aging, whether going through menopause is sort of happened on its own or been thrown at you in a short amount of time as part of your treatment, those hormonal changes do impact your sensitivity to alcohol, not in like a friendly, good way. Like a little bit goes a long way, and it may further impact your sleep and things like that. So something to be aware of, trying to certainly reduce. And there are so many amazing mocktail recipes that are delicious and fun. So many restaurants with like robust mocktail sections on their menu. So definitely a lot of ways to kind of go about reducing alcohol intake. Coffee, it's kind of like neutral in a sense. Again, hormonally, as we get more into perimenopause or menopause, we're more sensitive to caffeine typically. So having less coffee, having coffee just earlier in the day, maybe having green tea, which has a lot of immune supportive anti-cancer benefits, and less caffeine, might be something helpful. But, in the old days, they'd say if you drink a cup of coffee, you need an extra cup of water. That's not necessarily true, but the coffee or anything with caffeine or alcohol does not count towards your hydration. And then diet sodas, artificial sweeteners are not great as like a general daily habit. They're not necessarily carcinogenic when consumed in amounts that would be typical, but some of those artificial sweeteners are not necessarily helpful for your blood pressure. There's a lot of research looking at kidney health, and actually sometimes, oddly enough, they can increase blood sugar in other ways because your body thinks you're consuming sugar, so it might amp up sweet cravings. So in general, it's better to have sort of less of something real than more of something fake. But again, it's not like an all or nothing, kind of a thing.
Incredible. Thank you so much. I think just to tie in my very favorite thing, which is mushrooms, and I make mushroom tea regularly. So
Yes.
What are your thoughts on turkey tail and
Yes.
different mushrooms?
Yeah, mushrooms are incredible. So all the different mushrooms have a lot of immune supportive properties, like a lot. And again, you can buy like powders that are supplements. Again, that you got to like run by your team. But eating mushrooms, and like where we are, we have these mushroom farm shares, like farms that give CSAs for produce. Sometimes have like an actual box of mushrooms, and like for me, being such like a nerdy like Food Network cooking person, it's like, oh my God, this is like in real life. I've only like heard about this on TV. So all the different kinds of mushrooms are very, very healthy and very helpful. And then there are kind of very natural brands of mushroom coffee. Some may or may not have caffeine. You can get mushroom hot chocolate, mushroom tea. And they're really interesting. It might sound weird, but if you like mushrooms, they're delicious. But they're interesting. But those are great ways to kind of get more of that food if you don't have those fascinating kinds of mushrooms in your grocery store. But they have a lot of immune supportive properties. So those are definitely on the list.
Incredible. Well, I know I can talk about this all day long, but I do think that we probably should get to wrapping it up. So thank you so much for an incredible presentation.
Thank you.